Hey guys, let's just get right into this. I was just thinking about what it is that might trigger us to end up, super emotional, angry. What triggers us to end up back, at the beer cooler in the store when we have, had many days or years or months of sobriety. What gets us back, into our own addictions and afflictions and hurts, habits, and hang-ups, really. And what are the things that trigger us, and what are we blaming it on when we end up in that spot? And so, I was just wondering, the other thing is I was considering is this, is do we feel neglected? The people that we love, whether it's our spouse, our husband, our wives, do we feel neglected or, by our employer? And, are those things that make us feel neglected us leading us down the road of excusing the things that we do, our actions? Are we blaming what we do on other people? I was just looking at this great old barn here behind me. And you start seeing these barns across the Vermont landscape because dairy used to be a huge deal here in Vermont, agricultural in general. And what we're starting to see is the neglect of these old barns. And you can find these, scattered about the landscape of Vermont, is these barns that are broke down. And so we're back over, I was reading back in Nehemiah this morning, kind of last week we talked about Nehemiah and his, prayer when he hears of the things going on in his with the Israelites or in Jerusalem there, and he's saddened first and foremost, but he doesn't use that as an excuse to be triggered to kind of tuck his head in the sand, so to speak, and pretend like it's not going on. But what's he do? He gets down on his knees and before God he prays. And I believe if you go read it, you will understand how fervent that prayer is. And then we know his king lets him, lets the cupbearer go, and then the king gives him every provision he needs to go rebuild Jerusalem. But that's not really what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is what he did when he gets there. So when he gets there, the first thing he really starts doing after he's prayed and after he's got the provisions to go do this is he starts rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. But he doesn't start with the walls. What he starts with is the gates, the things that are going to protect the city, essentially, the inner sanctum of our lives, whatever's inside us. We need to protect that by first and foremost putting gates up, putting up things that prevent us from maybe going back down the road of, our past, the things that trigger us. We must put gates up first and foremost. And I think that what that really means is we need to stop neglecting the truth about what triggers us. We must start to embrace the truth of what triggers. We know that it was water and lack of, prevention, really. They just neglected the barn, didn't keep the water out, the thing rots, the trusses rot, and then they end up with this mess. And I think the same thing can happen to us, and it's just much, much quicker. This took hundreds of years. With us, it takes days, it takes hours. The next thing we know, this is what we look like, is we're falling apart at the seams, really. And so we have to put those gates up first and foremost that protect us from being triggered. We have to know what our triggers are. So what is it that gets you back into your, stinking thinking, where all of a sudden you're considering going and having a drink, or you're considering getting on that internet and opening up some sites that, what the truth is, you just got to stay away from those sites. They're so dangerous and so bad for our heads and so bad for our hearts, and they separate us from God. That's what ultimately happens each and every time we get triggered and then give in to those temptations of whatever it may be. Maybe it's you're going to head out to Las Vegas and go gamble. Maybe you can get online and do some gambling, or going down to the trap house, for some of us, whatever it might be. Maybe it's anger and bitterness and hurt towards your spouse, and you just start taking it out on them. I just want to encourage us today to understand what it is and what we need. First and foremost, set up gates, set up boundaries, set up limits, and say, okay, this doesn't work for me because I know it's going to trigger me. I know it's going to trigger my anxiety if I put myself in a certain situation. And so I can't do it. And we can't bend ever on some of these things that we set up in our lives to prevent us from first and foremost being triggered. These gates, we must put them up, and they must be big, solid gates. I can only imagine what the gates of Jerusalem looked like. I mean, there are big walls. heavy-duty fortified walls, and I'm guessing the gating system was even more fortified. If you keep reading in Nehemiah, what you see is as they start, rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, but you know what happens? The people in the area who don't worship God, that didn't know Jesus Christ or didn't know God at the time, but for those of us who don't know Jesus, those around us that don't know Jesus Christ or don't understand faith, don't understand God, and the enemy are going to come and they're going to attack us. They're going to try to get those soft spots. They're going to try to trigger us. They're going to try us to get back into their camp. Nobody, really wants to see anybody succeed, especially those who have not been able to get up out of the muck and the mire themselves. They're going to just keep dragging you back down. They're going to trigger you, in fact. So we need to, first and foremost, plan ourselves firmly that we're not going to go back down into the lion's den, so to speak. We're going to keep our head above water with that sort of stuff, and we're going to put those gates up. But I think second of all, we have to understand that, the workers end up doing in Nehemiah is they put up a vigilant guard system, and they guard those city walls as they work on it. It says, basically 24/7 they were guarding those walls. And then they even took it one step farther. They were not only guarding those walls, here's the deal. They were putting those walls up. They're plugging in the holes in the walls. They're fixing the walls. They're hanging, some groups are hanging gates. Some people are plugging walls, but they're all kind of like the idea that they got a mason trowel in one hand, troweling off, and on the other hand, they got a sword so they can defend themselves from the enemy who looks to come back in and get back in there and keep destroying those walls. Sometimes we're going to feel like that, like we're plugging one hole, plug a hole, and just spraying out another spot. But I can assure you what we got to do is we just got to keep at it. Keep working. Get your gates up. Understand what your pitfalls are, and don't give in to those little steps. I'm going to check out. I'm going to see how so and so's doing. He's my friend. He's my homie or whatever. I'm going to look. No, he's doing what he's doing, but it's going to drag you back down. Either he's doing well, good on him, but chances are he's not. Don't just walk into a bar if you got a drinking problem because you want to check and say, hey, see how the bartender's doing. This doesn't make any sense. What are you going to do? You're going to sit down at that bar and have a conversation with the bartender without drinking? Don't put yourself in that position. If the things that trigger an emotional response from your husband and wife, and it's going to end up in a fight, stop doing it. Go read Ephesians instead. Go read Ephesians, I think it's in 5, where it talks, or 4 or 5, somewhere in there, where it talks about husbands loving your wives. You know what? That might mean you're going to have to submit to God's will. That might mean you're going to have to swallow your own pride. But make a step and make a stand. I'm going to love her first. Maybe she doesn't, or I'm going to respect my husband, because it talks about that. Maybe you don't think he deserves your respect right now and he's not doing it. But you know what? Somebody's got to give up first. Someone's got to lay themselves down at the cross and say, what's more important to me is what the Bible says about honoring my spouse, or what the Bible says about not drunkenness, or the fruits of the Spirit. Put the gates up. Get those gates hung first and foremost, and then start patching the walls. Go read Nehemiah today. I encourage you to do that. It's a great story. I hope you guys like this. This barn here is caved in, and again, they're all across the landscape of Vermont. It's really unfortunate. But I hope you guys like what I had to say today. Do me a favor, please, hit like, subscribe, leave me a comment, really appreciate it. But first and foremost, here's what I want you to do. I want you all to keep the faith and have a blessed day.